I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach a City Ministries, and we're going to look at a third tool that really helps us locate where we are on the spiritual map. You'll remember we have a capacity for self-deception, and we have a lot of spiritual blindness that we're born with. And so God in His grace gives us in His Word clear, objective things that we can look at to know if we're blowing smoke or really on the right path. So we're going to look at what's known as the contrast lists in the New Testament, the contrast between good and evil, wisdom from above, wisdom from below, fruit of the Spirit, deeds of the flesh. If as a new believer or a continuing Christian, you are familiar with the contrast lists and you know it, you'll be able to spot things and know when there's contradiction between what you think you are and where you're actually at. So let's take a deeper look. When I was a new Christian in college, we were told to memorize. We were encouraged to memorize, and we were held accountable for memorizing some key verses in the New Testament, one of which was the deeds of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. So here's the truth behind this. Good and evil operate very differently, and if we know the character qualities of each in these passages, we will have a really good idea if we're in the good place or the bad place. So for instance, Paul says in Galatians 5:19 through 20, now the deeds of the flesh, the sin nature, the monster within, are evident. It's not subtle. It's right out there, which are immorality. If we're practicing immorality, if we're engaging in immorality, if we're participating in it, we're not in the Spirit. Impurity, that's like a dirty kind of living. Sensuality, just living for experiences and pleasures, kind of like a hedonist. Idolatry, worshiping something other than God, putting something in the top spot, it's a fail. Sorcery, practicing magic, working little formulas that give us control. Enmities, strife. Oh, you hate people? You're at odds with people all the time? Jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing. That's like hell raising. Things like these. If any of these things are in your life, you are at ought with God. You're out of sync with Him. Something's not aligned. So that's the nature of evil. Listen to the opposite thing. The fruit of the Spirit is agape love. That's self-sacrificing, redemptive love. Joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. That package of character qualities is produced when the Holy Spirit is in charge and in control. When we're governed by the Spirit and filled and under the influence of the Spirit, these are the things that come out of us. So you can use the fruit of the Spirit, this contrast list between the Spirit and flesh, to have a pretty good idea of where you're at. Another classic little list in the New Testament to memorize is in James 3. It's the wisdom from below and the wisdom from above. Here's the wisdom from below, the evil. The wisdom is not from God, which comes down from above, but it's earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. The wisdom from below produces disorder, and it's fertile ground for every kind of evil to grow. Selfish ambition, striving, competing with everyone, winners and losers. Jealousy, they have more than me, it's not fair. Again, it's of the earth, it's natural, it's demonic. It's not like the wisdom from God. Here's what God's wisdom's like. The wisdom from above is pure. It's clean and pure. It's peaceable. It's in harmony with God, and it's content with being right with God. It's gentle. It treats people tenderly. It's reasonable. It's willing to listen to arguments and discussions and think through things as opposed to reacting and raging. It's full of mercy. You look at people, even people who are bound up in sin, and you have tender pity, and you want to spare them. full of good fruits. It is doing good for others. It's unwavering. It's not a weak, codependent, compromise, give people whatever they want. It's unwavering. It stands with and for God. And it's without hypocrisy. It practices what it preaches. Again, wisdom from below, wisdom from above, a great way of telling where on the map you are. A third good place to go is the book of Colossians, chapter 3. We read on the negative, evil side, therefore consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. Paul continues in verse 8, but now you also put them all aside, anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you've laid aside the old self with its corrupt practices. And on the positive side, listen to this, as those who've been chosen of God, holy and beloved, you're special and loved by God, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Beyond all these things, put on agape love, which is the perfect bond of unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Again, you're A or B. It's one of those two things. And this is a very helpful compare and contrast, good and evil, spirit, flesh, former life, life in the spirit. Well worth memorizing and having this up and running in your conscious mind, looking at your life. Our final little tool is in Ephesians 4. And by the way, there's all kinds of stuff in the rest of the New Testament that fit these two lists. And there's positive things like the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. There's a list of virtues in 2 Peter chapter 1. These are things, the more we know them cold, the more we take them to heart and think about them and put them to work, the more we'll be able to know where on the map we are. Here's what it says in Ephesians 4:31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. On the positive side, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other just as God in Christ has also forgiven you. You'll notice there's a lot of overlap in these contrast lists. So let me urge you and encourage you, put to memory, memorize these contrast lists between good and evil, spirit and flesh, wisdom from below, wisdom from above, and you will be miles ahead of the Bible ignorant person who's just tossed to and fro by emotions and desires and urges and whatever, and is just living a wreck of a Christian life. Don't let that be you. Put these tools in your tool chest and put them to use, and you will do better. You'll have a map, and you'll know where you're going, and you'll know how to get right when you get off the path.